you considering divorce? Are you dealing with it now? Are you on the other side and not sure what comes next? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Divorce Do's and Don'ts Show with your host, Lisa C. Decker.
Welcome, everyone, to the Divorce Do's and Don'ts Show. I'm Lisa Decker, your host, and I am a certified divorce financial analyst and real estate collaboration specialist in divorce, as well as the CEO and founder of Divorce Money Matters and the organization that brings you this show, Divorce Town USA. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a special show for you because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And unfortunately, that is an issue that many women and some men face as a part of the divorce process or just their lives overall. But when they're going through divorce, it can sometimes take a nasty turn. So we want to help our viewers move past awareness to finding real solutions and have dedicated the next 2 weeks to bringing you resources that you can use to get and stay safe. Today, we will be interviewing Cindy Bell Gerhardt. Cindy, welcome to the show. And she is a mother of 5 and grandmother of 4. Cindy has been an advocate for women and children's issues for over 20 years, and her passion lies in helping others find their voice and seek wholeness. A personal note about Cindy, she has also worked in the automotive repair industry. How's that for a woman, right? Powerful woman. For the last 15 years in operations and risk management. Welcome to the show, Cindy, and thank you for taking the time to share your personal story and the resources you've created to help victims of domestic violence. So,
thank you so much, Lisa, for having me on.
I'm really delighted about it. I know Cindy personally. She is really quite a woman, and she's authored a book about her experience called From Broken to Badass, My Journey to My Brave First Step. And I got to tell you, I took the book home and I read it in one sitting because it was so compelling. I just wanted to know, how did you get through it all? How did the story end? And it's a wonderful book, and it gives people hope that they can move out of a difficult situation as well. So Cindy, what do you hope readers will take away from your story?
So, Lisa, I love the fact that you said you got through it in a very brief time. That was actually intentional. I've got 55 years of life, and I could have written a novel. Actually, it could have been probably put into 3 or 4 different books. But what I wanted was a very simple read for people to be able to start and finish within one day, that had a lot of highs and lows, that was very emotional, that could elicit some responses with humor and also with openness. But I think the most important thing that I wanted anybody who reads the book to understand is there's nothing special about my story. There's my ability to be able to overcome and move on after having a sexual assault and domestic violence in my life. There's nothing special about me. I was just surrounded by great resources, and I found an inner strength. And I wanted people to know that every single one of them have that inside of them, whether they realize it or not, that this is not a complicated, it's not a complicated process. I mean, it can be quite a hard task for somebody to do, but there's nothing extraordinary about me. I'm just Cindy. And there are people in my circle of influence that did not realize I had gone through those things. And they looked up to me because of the roles that I had served in. And I felt I needed to break down that barrier and say, listen, I have things that I've suffered with, just like so many of you that are silent. And I felt that because I had a platform, that I was obligated to share my story. And I think I know that it has empowered some folks to be able to share their own. So that was what the primary focus for me was, to empower people to share their story. Because once you can talk about it, then you can break out of it and then you can seek healing.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's so true. And your vulnerability in sharing the story is what Brene Brown talks about, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely
Dare to
are.
lead. Dare to lead. Great book.
Yes,
Vulnerability.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So I love that. And so was it difficult to write about those dark parts of your life? Sometimes we overshare. How did you find that balance? Because you did a really good job with it.
Thank you. It was hard. So it had been a long time since I had gone back and I don't know that I had ever actually taken a microscope and a flashlight to those things that had happened, the sexual assault at 16, and then, having a marriage that was peppered and seasoned with domestic violence. I don't know that I had ever taken a deep look. And when you get to a certain age and you look back on things that you had experienced, early trauma, the snapshot that you see, the vantage point is different. The timeline is laid out because you're no longer down in it. You're up and you can look down and see how you thought that the decisions that you make in life were your own and you were making decisions based off of what you thought was the right thing to do. But in actuality, when you look back and you're able to see those things that happened and that you experienced, you realize that many of your decisions were the results of trauma, that you weren't making decisions with the right frame of mind. You were making them in a protective mode, and then you do things that become habitual. So looking back and starting and actually putting it onto, well, I say put pen to paper, it was actually typing, but taking a look at it, I can't tell you how difficult it was, because I learned so much about myself and the patterns that I had adopted, and the people that in turn I had not had fulfilling relationships with after that. So it wasn't just difficult to share the things that had actually happened, but it was even more difficult to see how those things had impacted my life and how what I wanted, we all want to have a rich, full life that has joy and connection. And because of those traumas, I had missed out on those opportunities so often. So I don't think it was just the events themselves that were hard to dissect and put down, but it was also the acknowledgement that I missed out on so much, and in turn hurt other people because of my inability to connect, and my distrust. You get to a point where you don't trust people. To also put it plainly, it's difficult to share the details of a sexual assault or domestic violence when your children are going to read it and your family members are going to read it. It's not difficult if strangers read it. It's not. But knowing that your family members may be able to read it or will absolutely be able to read it, that was that was difficult. But it has to be told.
Yes.
It's my story. It's my story. And none of it was my fault. So that in itself is empowering and brave, to go ahead and start diving into that word. And I wanted to set a good example for my children.
Yeah.
That speak your truth, even if it hurts, even if somebody else may be taken aback by it. You've got to be able to speak your truth no matter what. So I guess that was a long answer to your short question. Was it difficult? Yes, at times it was very difficult.
I can imagine. I can honestly imagine. I know, I have a grandmother that I don't talk about much, that I never met. My mother's mother was killed in a domestic violence situation, and that has impacted my life for my entire life because my mother was emotionally stymied by it, and she was also physically abused. So they do cause scars with these kinds of things.
Absolutely.
It sounds like writing this book has been cathartic and
Oh,
healing for you. And, that's the part of the vulnerability that is so beautiful, because when you show, like you said, you wanted other people to know that, I have things too, right? We all have them, and
right,
yet we hide them. And by opening up and sharing enough, you don't need to give the gory details to everything, but just
right.
enough to say, I understand what you're going through.
Absolutely.
I can put my hand out and help you. It's beautiful. It really is. And I'm so proud of you for sitting down and writing this. I remember when you told me I just started writing my book, and so here we are. How wonderful. So has anyone reached out to you personally to give feedback, positive, negative? What kind of feedback have you gotten on the book?
I'm going to say that, oh, absolutely. I have received feedback 100%. And I'm going to say that the majority of the feedback that I have received has been overwhelming support and acknowledgement that I hear you, and then the first 2 weeks, and I get a little emotional about this, the first 2 weeks after the book came out on Amazon, and I've never advertised the book. I just shared it with my friends on Facebook, and then they bought it. It actually hasn't been advertised or anything yet in the public marketplace. And hopefully that will happen eventually. But what touched me the most was that immediately when people had started reading it, because like you said, it's a short read, so it didn't take long. Within 48 hours, I had people that, Facebook connections, people we may have come across, and we volunteer in the same association, but in different states. They were reaching out through Facebook Messenger or however they could contact me and saying, thank you so much for sharing. I have the same story, or my story is similar. And I will tell you, it broke my heart. I mean, it did what it was supposed to do, right? The book is supposed to break chains. It's supposed to allow you to say, oh my goodness, if Cindy can speak up, so can I. And even if you don't have to speak up, sometimes it's just an acknowledgement to yourself. Oh my gosh, I need to deal with that. Something happened and I've been pushing it down or not dealing with it. But it was, while it made me feel wonderful that they trusted me enough to reach out, it broke my heart, because I know what it was like to walk around for all those years carrying that around and not feeling comfortable or confident enough or brave enough to speak it. And it broke my heart to hear people that I knew that I had close contact, or maybe just residual contact with them over a few years, but they had worn the same mask that I had been wearing, I'm outgoing and I'm having a great time and I'm fun and I'm energetic and I'm passionate, and but inside we're just holding on to scars, and some of them it was still happening. And that's what really solidified what I had gone through to write the book and get the book out there. That's when I said, it's worth it. If one person says, I can't live like this anymore, I got to get out. And those things did happen. I did have just a couple of folks who, it's tough when you put things out there and people know that you're connected with a certain industry or maybe a certain company or a certain nonprofit. That maybe it's an overshare, but I don't think that way. That was just a few little responses that somebody didn't understand why I had to say those things publicly. Why couldn't I just say them privately? But those people don't understand, or maybe they have their own scars that they don't know how to deal with. But 99.99% of the people who responded either responded just with support saying, I never knew, and thank you for sharing, or me too. And that made it all worthwhile.
Yeah. And you're never going to get everyone to approve. I mean, that's not realistic, right? There's always going to be somebody who is a naysayer, and that's their right to their opinion. But
Well, it's a difficult topic.
yes,
It's a difficult topic, and a lot of people can't wrap their head. I think the distinction is, well, you're not a frail woman. You could probably have, stood up for yourself. Why didn't you stand up for yourself? But here's what the whole purpose of this nonprofit and the whole purpose of opportunities like this to speak out is that abuse is not just physical. Abuse is mental and emotional and verbal. And someone who is in an abusive situation is not, you don't have the skill set that you do when you're whole, and to be able to stand up for yourself, because it happens slowly over time. And you and I have talked about this before, about boundaries,
yeah,
right? And boundaries can become gray when you're in what you think is a healthy, loving relationship. Boundaries can kind of gray a little bit.
yes.
So I think for those people that just can't understand how it can happen, they've never been put in a position where they have been manipulated or slowly had their boundaries eroded.
It's so true. The emotional and the mental component of domestic violence or any kind of abuse can be just as damaging. The physical wounds heal, but the others
Absolutely.
take a lot more work.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
I once worked as a journalist in a small town that I lived in, and I was asked to interview a woman who had been recovering from being shot by her ex-husband. She had just divorced. And I met with her. It took her about 10 hours to tell me her story. And she had to take a lot of breaks, but she talked about the same thing. It came on slowly. It was, little incident here and a little incident there. And, he would always bring home flowers and apologize profusely after what happened the night before. And she always wanted to believe, but over time, he also wore her down. So she had no self-esteem. He separated her from her family and her friends. So, there's a lot of tactics that go on behind this. And it is
Absolutely.
a slow process. And eventually, he literally shot her, and he was out of jail before she was out of the hospital. She had to learn to walk and talk and do all kinds of things again. And
It's awful.
I don't know the final outcome of what his sentence was, if any, but there's just so much violence in our world right now. And I think domestic violence is something that people are afraid to talk about and ashamed of as well. And,
Oh, absolutely.
speak to that, because, you feel like something's wrong with you, right? Or you don't want your family to be the one that is dealing with this, whether it's
Yes.
abuse or drugs or alcohol or, any of these things. But we need to know that there are others out there who have experienced these things that we can
Right.
share with, that we can gain strength from, that we can rally around each other. There's so much importance in that, but the shame component, I think, stops a lot of people from reaching out for help. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I agree. I was raised, I'm Southern. I was raised in the South, and all of this took place back in the 80s, in the 80s and then into the 90s. My sexual assault took place at church. It was a youth pastor, and you don't talk about things like that, and you definitely don't say it out loud, because we belong to the church. We're incorporated into a church family, and you just can't talk about things like that. You misunderstood, or you didn't really, none of that really happened. It was your imagination, or perhaps you were in the wrong place at the wrong time wearing the wrong thing. Back in the 60s and 70s, 80s, it was very difficult to have conversations, because there was an expectation on women that, well, If you don't want anybody to flirt with you or be handsy with you, then you have to conduct yourself a certain way. We've been empowered now to be able to say, what's that saying that they teach the kids these days, that no means no. I don't, it didn't apply back then.
Right.
No meant, well, just ask a little bit harder or whatever. So
Yeah. Boys
there
will
is
be
a
boys
stigma.
kind of thing,
There's
right?
a stigma that this doesn't happen to me. And let me tell you, Lisa, so, and you'll read this, you'll read a little bit of in the book. What precipitated me just having to start the nonprofit was right after I moved to Atlanta. And you know this story from the book. I was in traffic and a young woman she jumped out of the car in front of me. The car slammed on brakes. She jumped out with her son and she ran between the car, the car she jumped out of and my car. And on her way past my front, the front of the car, she said, "Help." And then she just kept running to the sidewalk. And so I just kind of pulled over in the middle. And anyway, after I got her home safely, her and her son home safely. And then we started talking about that. And this was before the book, this was before anything. I realized, because of where she lived and the demographics of where she was located, there weren't a lot of resources at all. No matter how hard she tried, there just weren't a lot of resources because there's such a long waiting list for stable housing. And it's just, there's so many cases of domestic violence and people just can't get out because they don't have a safe place to go.
Mm-hmm.
The contrary to that is the next year I was in New Orleans for a PTA convention and I met a young lady at a restaurant whose husband was being absolutely verbal abusive towards her. And because I just can't help myself, I'm drawn to that situation and I have to go intercede safely. And I just asked her if she needed help. And she said, "I do." And I said, "Great, come with me and I'll get you over here and we'll talk and we'll figure out what to do." And that young lady came from an affluent area where there's lots of resources. But she didn't want to talk about it because that's not things that you talk about in those communities. So the disparity in where resources are available is so frustrating because and I'm not saying it all is a socioeconomic issue, that if you're in a community that has lots of resources, it automatically isn't spoken of. But for the majority of situations, the areas that have the most need are the areas that don't have the resources available. So the purpose of starting the nonprofit is to first evaluate the services available. And what do those services offer? Because there's there's shelters, and then there's places that offer financial help and help. If you need urgent shelter, they can provide you monetary resources to get a hotel, especially if you have children and you have to leave your clothing behind. Some connect you with faith-based associations. Some connect you with mental health resources. Every single resource and program is a little different. They have different nuances. So depending on where you're located, you may not have something that can fulfill the needs that you have. So that was the reason for developing the nonprofit.
First, what is the nonprofit's name, Cindy?
The nonprofit is called Brave First Step.
I love it. It is a brave first step. It really is.
It is. And that first step is just saying, I need help.
Yes.
I need help. And or even, yeah, exactly. It took for me, after so many times of going to the emergency room or not even going to the emergency room, but just running away and then having to come back, right? Because I had kids and I didn't know what to do. It took an emergency room doctor to finally say to me, "How many times are you going to keep going back? Listen, if you want to get hurt, that's your business." It might not have been what you would expect a physician, a caregiver to say, but when he saw my folder that I had just, this is a repeated thing, he just said, "Yeah, you have kids?" Yes, sir, I do." And he goes, Why and you need to be a better mother because you're teaching your children to that abuse is okay. And what if one day you don't make it here? What if one day you die? He's raising your kids. And I had never thought of it. I thought the reason that I was staying was because I was a good mom and I was trying to keep my family together, and I can take this as long as I'm protecting them. But in reality, you're not protecting them, you're teaching them. And you said earlier, your grandmother, your mother, it is in a family, it's generational. If it's learned behavior, and somebody has to say, it stops here, it stops with me. And it takes bravery, it takes boldness to be able to do that. It is scary to finally raise your hand and say, this is wrong and I can't do this anymore. No one should be in a home where they're not where they're not thriving, where they're not loved, appreciated, valued. Because that's what we do, is we decrease our value. We forget how valuable we are, and that we don't deserve goodness, that we don't deserve love and kindness and generosity. And that's because it's slowly over a period of time being taken away from us, our worth and our value.
Yeah, they erode it. And it's a lot of gaslighting too. There's some techniques used, but yeah, I can understand what it's like for someone to have gone through something like that. And when people say, why don't you just leave? Well, because it's the mental breakdown, telling you that you're worthless and no one else will want you. And you hear that enough, you begin to believe it, especially when you've been beat down physically, mentally, and emotionally. So tell me, what does your organization do exactly? Do you bring together all of the resources in one place, or what is it that you're trying to do with your nonprofit?
So we're still in the birthing phase, right? I've got a wonderful board of trustees, and I was smart enough to select very passionate people, but also in their own way, in their own areas of expertise. They're very busy. But when we come together collectively, what we're doing now is slowly collecting information about programs and resources. We have a matrix. And like I had mentioned earlier, does this program offer financial assistance? Do they offer immediate shelter? Do they offer clothing? Provide ways and mechanisms for, if you've left everything behind, do you have food, clothing? Do they connect you to financial resources or to a faith-based association? And do they provide mental health? Because those things, you can provide someone the money for a hotel room, and you can get them out of that situation. But if you don't give them a pathway, you just opened a door to another hole. And so before we start, because ultimately what we want to have is a database of all the programs. And I have people who have reached out to volunteer from all across the country, people that I've made connections with through my volunteerism with PTA that are all across the country. And they've said, how can we help? And so once we know the resources in every area, the primary resources in each state and the major contacts in those states. If someone in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania says, I need help, and they reach out to us, we can connect them with a volunteer there who can say, let me assess what you need, and I can direct you to the right program. So it's an immediate help and response, rather than here's a 1-800 number, call them and then they'll direct you. I want our volunteers to be able to have that information for their communities at their fingertips. So there's a lot of work on our end at the beginning to go through that. Also, what I'm trying to do now is connect with other groups that have resources, and whether it's financial resources or have those connections as well. I think that by partnering and collaborating, maybe building a coalition, we can expand our footprint and our voice, because ultimately, I want to make sure that every person who wants help gets help. But first, they have to be empowered to ask for it. And that's actually the biggest hurdle. That's actually why, I mean, so yes, great first step is by saying, I need help, but because you have to put your voice behind it. It's just acknowledging that you're ready, because not everybody's ready. Not everybody sees the light at the end of the tunnel, and feels like there is something better for them. They feel like that's all that there is. This is how their life's going to be, and they've come to a point of acceptance. And that's not what's left. That's why it's called We're Broken to Badass, because
Well, what comes to mind, Cindy, is that no matter what you're dealing with in your life, it takes that brave first step to say, I need help. This is bigger than I can handle on my own.
with anything,
Truly, whether it's addiction or, this situation or financial help or medical help. I mean, there comes a point where you say, I can't do this on my own anymore. It's not working.
Sure.
I need someone to guide me. And that's when you're ready. That's when you're ready, because you're open. Then you're an open vessel to allowing the help to come in and the resources to help you. Because before that, especially with addiction, and a lot of times addiction leads to it, alcoholism addiction leads to domestic
100%.
violence, right?
That's
But
correct.
there's a point where, you can't help someone if they don't think they have a problem, or if they're not willing to get help.
That's
And
correct.
it's the same thing with domestic violence. It took all those times of you going to the hospital, thinking you were doing the right thing, keeping your family together. And that doctor being so blunt, and he probably could have said it in a nicer way, but you know what? He woke you up.
That's right. If he had said it nicer, Lisa, I wouldn't have heard him. I was in the right place at the right time, and he was the one that saw me in the room. If it had been someone else who patched me up, took the pictures, patched me up, and said, okay, just be careful, here's a card, call this resource. If that's what had happened, I don't know where I'd be today. There are often times I want to go back. I want to go back to that hospital. It was in a different state. I want to go back and see if they'll let me see my records to see who the attending physician was.
Yes.
But I don't want to get them in trouble by saying you were hard on me, but I needed you to be hard on me.
No, I was just thinking that as you said that, even if you could reach out through a phone call or something,
I would love to, because you
just tell him that you gave me such a gift that day, that
that's right.
no idea what you started, this whole unraveling of the way that things were, which led to a much better way of being.
Sure.
And that now it's taken me to this place all these years later. It took me this time to heal, but I've written this book and I've started this organization, and I would like to, share with you what you did. And I think that would be so beautiful. Oh, I love it.
I tell you what, I think I'm going to do it, and I'll have to report back to you and let you know how it goes.
That sounds great.
Lisa, and here's the other thing, and that every day we come in contact with people, and we have an opportunity to be pivotal in their life, right? Because you don't know what somebody is going through. You have no idea. So by having these conversations, by being able to encourage each other and make someone feel valued, maybe that's the one thing they needed to hear that day, that when they go back home, they won't listen when someone says, you're not worthy, you're not valuable, you're nothing. You can't do this without me. So I think every conversation that we have has to be intentional, even casual, just being kind to each other and supportive and empowering. I'm just at a point in my life now where I try to make sure that I'm looking for a person, the person in the room that doesn't look like they're comfortable, or they don't look like they fit in. If we're in a meeting space or something, you want to just gravitate to that person and say, hey, I'm glad you're here. Yeah. I don't know what you're going through. You look like you got some things on your mind, but just so you know, if you need to talk, I'm right here. And sometimes that's all it takes. And you could save lives just by being intentional in the conversations that you have with people, even complete strangers, because it saved my life.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I've done that, and I've had it done to me at some difficult times, and with strangers, just strangers who took a look at me or I took a look at them, you can see pain on people.
Yes,
You may
can.
not have to know the details of it, but just to walk up and say, whatever you're going through, you're going to be okay. Is there something I can help you with? Is there
Absolutely.
some place I can point you to? And it is the most rewarding thing in the world to be able to do that for another human being, or to have someone do that to you. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
I agree.
Honestly, I will never forget some of those moments. So
Because
this is
people that are inside of that darkness, they've lost hope. They've lost light. They don't see that life is so much better on the outside of it, right? They get down in that dark place. So by just trying to be a light everywhere you go, you just give people hope. It's important.
Yeah. You are a light in the world. I love that. So tell us, in the moments that we have left here, what is the significance of the tattoo on your cover of your book and the side of your arm there?
Side of my arm. So
show it there, Cindy.
Oh, this is it. It is I don't know, you probably can't see it very well, but it is a sword. It is the Excalibur sword. You've read the book. I love martial arts. I love tactical training. Through my domestic violence situation, I grew to love self-defense, right? So I love sharp, pointy things that I can, I don't know, I just like it. But so there's a sword and a shield, and then you'll see here over the hilt of the sword is a crown.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the book, on the cover of the book. So I got that 2 years ago because for the nonprofit, because it symbolizes what the nonprofit is there to do. It is there to fight for, right? To fight for, I hate saying victims, but at the moment, if they don't realize that they're being hurt and abused, they are a victim, right? But they're a survivor. So it's to fight for, whether it's helping change laws, helping develop programs, it's to get out there and fight the fight to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be happy, healthy, whole. The shield is to protect them. So when they raise their hand, we don't do anything to put them in further harm's way. We do whatever it takes to make sure that we get them out and get them into a safe place. So the shield is to protect, and then the crown is to remind them who they are, their worth and their value, that they're queens. And,
Beautiful. That is beautiful.
It was important
I love it,
to make sure I wear that. Yeah.
And is there something special about the key that you wear around your neck in the photo? I think, do you have it on now?
I don't have it on now, but so
what's the book cover? Do you have that? Can you show us that?
The book cover?
Is it on it's around in the photo? There's something of a photo.
Yes. Well,
yes.
Well, I don't know if you can see it through the
phone
because we've got the blacked out screen.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, can see a little bit of it right there.
Okay.
Right there's a key.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a company called The Giving Keys, and you can purchase a key for someone that has a word on it, and they have their standard words, or you can have a word, whatever words you want put on it. And I had a friend of mine who was dealing with cancer. I think you and I may have talked about her before. She had been diagnosed with cancer, and I wanted to give her something that she could have on her at all times when she was going through chemo that would make her feel strong. And I was reading the words on the website, and I'm like, yeah, love, grace, peace. I didn't like any of those, and it said you can make your own word. So I thought, okay. I want her to feel strong. So I typed in the word warrior. So I bought her a warrior key, and she ended up, so the purpose of the Giving Keys is you wear the key, whatever the word is that somebody gives you. You don't buy your own, it's given to you. And you wear it until you have embraced that word. Whether it, again, there's lots of different words, right? Peace and harmony, or release, healing.
Mhm.
So you wear it until you feel like you've embraced it, and then you're supposed to give it to someone else that you feel needs it.
I like that.
And then you go to the website and write your story. So I gave her the warrior key. She has been able to give that warrior key and pass it on to someone else who was going through cancer. So at the end of my term as president of Florida PTA, it's tradition to give away gifts to your board members. And I had about 45 board members. And I decided, because during our term, we went through a hurricane and we went through the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas,
Oh.
when those 17 children or 17 people died or were murdered. I bought all of them a warrior key. So that started a movement where now that those warrior keys have been passed on. So it doesn't matter what you're going through. So I wear my key because it just reminds me that I am strong, I am badass.
You are badass.
And
You
so,
really are.
and I often I still give out warrior keys whenever I hear a story of someone who has overcome a great deal of stuff in their life. I will make them a little card, and I will give them a warrior key that lets them acknowledge just how badass they are. So it's very significant to me.
That's beautiful. I'm going to look into that. I've never heard of it, but it's beautiful. What is the name of the site again?
The Giving Keys.
Giving Key. Okay. So as we wrap up here, tell us, is there another book coming soon?
Yes. Yes. So I decided, after hearing all of those stories that people were sharing, and some are still in a place of healing and are not ready to really fully share, but some said, I've got a story to share and you've inspired me. So what I thought I would do, since I've already gone through the process of self-publishing and I know the ins and outs, I've asked a few people if they'd like to share their story. So
Right.
what I want to do is do a compilation of stories of survivors, of warriors, if you would, and I want to call it Beautiful Badasses. And then have a picture of everybody, you know, have their picture at the beginning of all their chapters. So, because I think it's important, if you're brave enough to say, I did it, I broke out and I am better for it. I mean, it's just like, you know, I allude a little bit in the book to Harriet Tubman, right? Who became free. She became free. And she didn't go celebrate her freeness. Right? She didn't go, oh, I'm out, now let me go shopping. She said, I'm out, I'm free, let me go back and get others.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a mission, right? Because once you have seen the fullness that's available to you, you don't want anybody trapped in darkness again, right? So that's everybody that wants to share says, if I share my story, it's going to touch somebody else. So that's the whole point, is again, to help start breaking some chains so people can get free.
Well, Cindy, how can folks reach you?
So I have a website called bravefirststep.org. And I have on there, you'll see all the information. You can purchase the book, you can make a donation. There's a link to my email address, but it's bravefirststep.org.
Great. And folks, the book is available also at divorcetownusa.com in the marketplace. So get that book and pass it on to someone who could use it, because it really does take a brave first step. And I'm so glad that you took your brave first step in telling your story here, Cindy, and that you were able to join us today. So thank you so much,
Lisa. I appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Well, Marcella, I need you to pull up some slides for us so we can talk about some resources available for folks here coming down the line. And first off, we have a Divorcetown USA. You can download the Divorcetown USA roadmap, which you see here. This includes an ebook that explains each of your options. And yes, you do have options on how to get divorced. It helps you to understand which one will be best for you, your family, and outlines other professionals or resources you may need to access along the way. Because just like taking a brave first step when you're getting divorced, divorce, you need to have a roadmap. You need someone to help you, somewhere to go. So we have the resources to help you get started. We also offer many free articles and videos, and our marketplace features some of our favorite products and services that we found to help you through the divorce process. And we continually are adding more and more because we want you to have a safe place to go to find the best of the best. And slide 2 here has to do with divorce money matters. And that is where you can download your free divorce financial fitness kit. This kit will help you get better organized so that you're better able to deal with your money matters during your divorce. And it also includes a working Excel spreadsheet and a list of must-ask questions when you do meet with a family attorney. And listen, you need to know the questions to ask so that you hire the right effective attorney for you. We also have a virtual divorce help and hope support group meeting sponsored by Divorcetown USA through meetup.com, which meets once a month or twice a month sometimes. And we have meeting dates and times are always posted on Divorcetown USA in the events section and at meetup.com. So that's the Divorce Help and Hope Support Group. Now, next week, we're going to be talking about another common issue that sometimes keeps victims in abusive relationships from leaving, and that is not knowing what might happen to a beloved pet. So we are going to continue our theme of Domestic Violence Awareness Month next week. We're going to speak with a special guest from Ahimsa House who is going to share ideas and resources for helping you and your pets stay safe. And I have to tell you, I love, love, love this organization. They will literally find a safe haven for your pet, because you can't take pets to shelters, to hold your pet until you get your life back on track, and then you can be reunited with your pet. And it is a wonderful thing. So we hope you found this week's episode of Divorce Do's and Don'ts helpful, and we look forward to seeing you all next week and every week as we continue improving the way the world divorces one family at a time. Thank you for showing up today.